The elevator door in front of us opened, and I saw nothing but darkness. I breathed, taking in the stench of the dead, and something unnatural. I heard the click of a button, and Kaz's flashlight illuminated the hall in front of us. Months-old corpses lined it, and devious creatures skittered across the floor. Aerosol in one hand, helmet in another, I stepped into the dimly lit hallway. At the very end was a small room. One Kaz pointed out contained the doorway between our world and the world between. 2 swans shot out of the darkness. I unleashed a healthy amount of aerosol, and they fell to the floor, already changing back to their normal snowy white forms. But being swans, they continued to chase me for the hell of it. I rushed to another room and closed the door behind me. A troop of zombie monkeys, probably once used for animal testing, were locked inside a cage, fortunately. They were all covered in dried blood, and their fur stood up, resembling spikes. One of them bent the bars like they were made of rubber, and the monkeys swiftly pounced towards me. At any rate, the aerosol worked equally well on it, and moments later, the monkeys all fell to the floor, shivering as they changed from monsters to animals, running around in confusion. "Here we are," Kaz said with hesitation, opening the door. "The doorway." "It's a well," I said, taking a quick look inside. Somehow, I thought it had looked different, but it was still a well, just like any other. Well, like the trans-dimensional well doorways I'd seen, the one at Mayflower Valley. I peered over the edge of the well, and I saw not an abyss, but a room, the same as the one we were in. It was, of course, the Shepherd Lab I'd first seen through the drone. I thought back on the past. Past me would have never imagined I'd be here today, about to enter the very lab she had puzzled over. "Ready?" Kaz asked, lowering a rope ladder down the well. I looked at Kaz, and then back at the well. Always. With that, I hoisted myself over and began to climb downwards, into the old Shepherd Lab. Kaz followed a moment later, dropping down into the lab. I looked up. I saw the well jutting out of rock, and through it, I saw our world. Interesting. It was like our world was stacked on top of the world between. There was a hypothesis I read once, stating that worlds upon worlds are stacked on each other, just vibrating at different frequencies. Perhaps, I wondered, Quint's doorways cut through the frequencies, allowing us to travel to other layers of the universe. Or perhaps not. Kaz tapped Daniel's keycard on the door, revealing the rest of the lab. Like before, the dead were strewn out around the room. Already, I could feel the atmosphere changing, and so I put on the helmet. I relaxed, breathing naturally, protected against the alien air. I looked at Kaz, and motioned for them to put theirs on too. "These things are stuffy," Kaz mumbled, voice muffled and hollow. "I think I'm allergic." "You're just being fussy," I joked. "Feels perfectly fine to me." "Suit yourself. I hate these things." Kaz let out a giggle. We continued down the hallway, reaching the main lab. Somehow, power was still on. Kaz deactivated the flashlight, and we looked around. Screens still showed data. Research was still on the table, as if people were still living here. Something else bothered me, though. There were no bodies here, and in the hall before, there were. I tossed Kaz a spray can of aerosol. "Something's up here." "Here, yeah." Kaz then pointed outside, through a window. "Outside? That's a whole other problem." I looked, seeing the upside-down church still beating rhythmically. It was creepier up close, and veins seemed to pop up and melt away as it beat. More importantly, however, was a staircase, carved from rock, leading up to a doorway, leading inside the church. "I wonder why it looks like that," I said. "A church, an upside-down one too. It's strange a god from another world would take on our imagery. Yeah, Kaz mumbled. I wonder if we'll ever know. Indeed, I murmured. Kaz, how do we get to the church? This lab does have an exit, right? There's two, Kaz explained. But how are we going to get past those things? I looked at what Kaz was pointing at, seeing a dozen or so creatures, black and oily. Tentacles emerged from them, and it was hard to see what their bodies looked like. The head, however, was its most noticeable feature. Venus flytrap, I murmured. It's the creature. What creature? Kaz inquired. I explained that Kreese had shown me a fossil, the bizarre beast with a Venus flytrap-looking head. Outside, the creatures were resting, all spaced evenly on the rocky ground. I traced their position, realizing they were at the base of the stairs. We'd have to get past them if we wanted to enter the church. We'll just use the enzyme, I pondered. But the creature didn't fit the aesthetic the rest of the animals the Devourer infected looked like. No, it was oily, black, not the pinkish translucent that the infected were. Kaz saw it too. Alicia, I don't think that's going to work. One of the creatures stood up, opening its jaws to let air inside. It looked oddly humanoid, except for the long winding tail and the amount of appendages. Another, beside it, woke up and hissed at the first one. They began to fight, throwing their hooked tentacles at each other. They pounced, and their shrieks were so loud we could hear them, even inside the lab. Eventually, though, the first one won, sending the other scrambling into the shadows, leaving behind a trail of black blood. They're called shadow paths, Kaz informed, showing me a paper filled with diagrams and data on the beast. The other researchers apparently saw them all the time. This is my first time seeing one. I looked through the data, confirming my suspicions. This was an animal native to this dimension, and they were immune to the corruption of the Devourer. And even if they were infected, their base form was far too dangerous to deal with anyway. Looks like they communicate by using sound, I read. Echolocation. If we play something loud enough, they should leave us alone. Got anything like that? Kaz inquired. I shook my head. Guess we'll have to look. I looked around, searching. I searched through the papers the researchers had left behind, hoping they left some notebook or device behind. But as much as we worked, I ended up with nothing. Kaz, however, found a very odd-looking device. I think this could work. They pressed a trigger, and suddenly I was hit by a wave of alternating pulsing sound. That could... I stopped as the sound suddenly faded out, glitching. Kaz stared at the device in shock. Out of battery? I took the device, looking at its batteries. Doesn't look like anything I've ever seen. We searched the lab some more, and yet we found no such batteries. We'd have to play it by luck. Somehow, we were going to have to sneak past the creatures and enter the church and blow it up. I looked back out of the windows. Before, I thought it was suspended in the air by massive hooked tentacles, similar to the tentacles of the shadow paths. Now, it seemed like the church was resting on the rock, though the hooked tentacles were still there, in place. I wondered why the hooks were there if the church was already resting on the rock, albeit upside down. Maybe it connected it with the rest of the plague. Blood vessels, perhaps. Okay, I began, thinking. Here's the plan. This place has 2 exits. One of us lures those shadow paths towards the lab here and distracts them. The other person goes in and blows up the church. I could make the noise, Kaz pointed out. What can make enough noise to lure them all here? You're smart, Kaz. You'll figure it out, I joked. Yeah, they murmured, thinking. I will. And so the plan was set. I ran to one exit, Kaz to another. Slowly but surely, I began to make my way towards the stairs, careful not to alert the demonic-looking creatures, until suddenly the shadow paths all rose, turning towards me. They turned their heads as if they could detect my heartbeat. They were sensing the sound from there. This plan was not going well at all. "Hey, Shadow Paths," I hesitated. "Just passing by." Their leader, a scarred monstrosity larger than the others, crept towards me, snarling. I sprayed the aerosol can, just as I thought. No effect. The thing snarled, opening its flytrap jaws to roar. Oh, great. The monster lunged at me, just missing as I threw myself out of the way. I got back up, seeing the creature slowly rise. Its pack began to creep towards me like a band of feral wolves, until suddenly, music from the lab roared a louder sound, the sound of an orchestra playing music, loud music that clearly began to bother them. The creature stopped looking at me, now snarling at the music instead. I looked back at the lab, seeing Kaz at the other entrance, Bluetooth speaker in hand, playing a loud piece I swore I'd played in high school. Was it Traveller? "Hey!" Kaz snapped at the creatures. "Over here!" The Shadow Paths all turned and leapt, charging to obliterate Kaz and the speaker. I luckily was left alone, and I quickly ran up the stairs until... a hiss. I looked back to see a creature smaller than the rest of its pack, a younger Shadow Path, jaws aimed straight at me. It was only a dozen or so steps behind me, and moving towards me, alarmingly fast. I ran, climbing the steps whilst hearing the creature stumble behind me. The suit I was wearing didn't help either, and I wondered when I'd be able to take it off. The church was close, and I could see its upside-down door, almost reaching it when I tripped, a tentacle dragging me behind. I saw the jaws of the beast opening and closing. I found my knife, hidden in the suit pocket, trying to stab it. I hit the ground, time and time again, until I threw it, landing it right into its throat. The thing howled in pain. I felt the air get thinner. Looking at my leg, I saw that its hooked tentacles had cut through my protective suit. I ran into the church, hoping I could detonate the grenades before the oxygen-poor atmosphere killed me first. I gasped for air as I entered the building. What the heck? I wondered, suddenly able to breathe. The air of the church was fine, non-toxic. I checked my suit levels. It said the atmosphere was safe to breathe. Further, there were lights in the church. Light that was not coming from my flashlight. I took the suit off, slowly, turning off my light as I did so. I looked through a fleshy window, seeing the creature skulk away. I just lost my knife, my only weapon besides the 3 grenades. I heard distant whispers, screaming that a visitor had arrived. Hello? Is someone there? I looked to see candlelights and lanterns on floors and desks, still burning. Or were they a part of the Devourer's body? The ground below me began to shake, and I fell. When I got up, I looked outside to see the church had left its crevice in the ground, now levitating. No, the tentacles had lifted it up into mid-air, just as I'd seen once before. I saw the Shadow Path pack tear at the lab. I hoped Kaz was okay. Even through the walls, I could still hear the sound of the music. I gasped suddenly. I was thrown against the wall, and then on the floor rather than the ceiling. The church had flipped over, and it was no longer upside down. I looked at the grenades in my backpack. No time like the present. I made my way to the very centre of the church, a great hall with a stage and rows of pews. I unclipped one of the grenades and threw it onto the stage. The explosion knocked the air out of me, and when the smoke cleared, I coughed. The explosion had no effect. I threw another, then another. No effect. I sprayed the canister of aerosol until it ran out. No effect. The lights began to dim though, as if blown away by wind. In seconds, the place got dark, and I was forced to fumble for my flashlight. I searched through, forgetting where I'd last seen it. I clumsily found it and turned it on, only to scream, finding myself face to face with a face in front of me. "Who are you?" I assumed a fighting stance in case a visitor was hostile. I shone the light onto the figure. It was a woman, dressed like she had sprung from the 17th century. She was wearing a magnificent blue gown with a hooped skirt and had curly dark hair. She was looking down, not at me, but at the floor. She then turned, looking up at the stage. And I saw that the stage was basked in light, silhouettes of people on it, with a man in the centre stage, right on the podium. "Hello?" I asked. "Who are you people?" I stepped closer. The woman in front of me was unmoving. I took another step, then another, all the way to the stage, trying to get a better glimpse of the people. I shone my light on them, more confused than scared. And then, one by one, the people began to move. They were pointing at me, no, at a doorway leading out into another hall. All stood, emotionless but for the single arm, outstretched to point beyond the room. "Do you want me to go there?" I asked, looking at the doorway. "Who or what are you people?" I looked back, only to see nothing. I turned back to the pews, seeing the woman. She was pointing at the door, except something was wrong with her. I couldn't see her face anymore. No, it was almost like she was changing into... I ran out of the room before I could see what she changed into. The door slammed behind me, some kind of supernatural force pouring through it. I was now in a library, with multiple shelves containing antique books, but yet, when I flipped through them, none of the words made any sense. There was a desk in the centre, a luminous dark green gem in the centre of that. On the wall behind it was a map of an island I'd never seen before, and a sword. And behind the desk was a skeleton, covered in tattered old clothing. "Isla Consiga," read the text above the map. I looked down on the desk, now seeing a book that I swore hadn't been there before. It was titled The Book of Crease, and I picked it up and began to read. Well, it was in really old English, and it took me a while, maybe an hour, to understand it, but when I finished, I was left disturbed and terrified. See, the Crease bloodline was old, and it turns out that they were the first to open a doorway between our world and the world between, because, to put it simply, the Creases weren't from our world. Tens of thousands of years ago, there had once been a society living peacefully in the other world, a glorious empire at its prime. Slowly, their technology had advanced to a greater level than our world, and very soon discovered the way of opening doors between worlds. They opened a doorway into North America, arriving at Canada, where they explored and discovered a beast hidden in the ice, a beast that they would later call the Devourer. But where the beast came from was a mystery. Apollo Crease, leader of the explorers, learned the language of the native people, who said it had fallen from the stars. The Creases took it back to their world, working to thaw out the small mass of tentacles and flesh, and when it finally melted, disaster struck. The beast began to, devour, destroying the Crease civilization in the world between. The remaining Creases fled their world, entering our world, and somehow they managed to close the doorway, using a luminous green gemstone that had landed near the creature. A woman, Clara Crease, went into their homeworld, closing it from the inside. The book then goes on to tell more of the Crease people, their bloodline, an eventual empire in the Mediterranean, and strangely, even a branch of the empire determined to keep people from opening a gateway to the other world. A branch I was sure Quint was a part of. And then it gets weirder. In the 1700s, an explorer, Apollo Crease IX, discovered an island in the midst of the Pacific. He explored, finding strange beasts that looked half reptile and half bird, as well as more strange green stones. He left, taking more of the stones with him, and eventually he travelled with the Puritans, travelling to what would later become Caston City. It was a Puritan colony back then, and among them were those of the bloodline Crease. And it was there that the Creases decided to run a catastrophic experiment. They sought to open yet another doorway between our world and the other. Again, they encountered a guardian, Quint. But unlike today's events, they set him on fire, manipulating the Puritans into believing he was involved in witchcraft. And meanwhile, Apollo Crease slowly took over the Puritans' church, securing himself as the lead preacher. He created the room I was standing in, a small place to call home base. And from there on, they began their experiments, using ways and technology lost by time to open another door between worlds. Again, they were successful, forming one in the town well, leading deep into what the Puritans believed to be hell. The Crease bloodline wanted to destroy the Devourer and return to their home world, safe and sound, but yet all attempts were not effective. They tried fire, gunpowder, devices I'd never heard of, and yet, whatever they destroyed, the Devourer regenerated. In the end, the being swallowed the colony whole, dragging it into the world between. Fortunately, it seems, the thing hadn't set its sights on the rest of the world. Inside the world between, it was horrible. Their town was slowly being converted. The Puritan colony prayed even as they were transformed, while the Creases did everything in their power to fight off the onslaught of evil. And somehow, the Devourer became something more. Apollo Crease's journal spoke to him, taunting at his failure to reclaim his home. The Devourer began to have plans now of corrupting our world as well. And so, as the church they lived in began to shift into the mind and heart of the Devourer, Apollo Crease closed the gateway, before finally succumbing to the Devourer. And yet, the journal spoke of a guardian who was to bring a copy of the journal to our world, to warn the other Creases not to open doors. Quint Mognis, I murmured. I heard someone open the door behind me and say, "Very observant, Dr. Valerio." I turned around, only to see Dr. Crease. "How did you get here? We knocked you out," I cried. Anna rubbed her head. "That really did hurt," she angrily groaned. "Turns out I recover extremely quickly. But Quint, it looks like he's not coming to save you now," she taunted, pointing her pistol at me. "Wait! But if you knew all this, Quint, the journals, your home, why? Why?" Dr. Crease paused, thinking, lowering the pistol. I needed to know. Knowledge is power. I never thought the Devourer was as terrible and evil as the ancestors said it was. I thought with our modern technology, we could destroy it for good this time. "Why didn't you? I didn't have any shiny green rocks," she continued. Anna gestured at the skeleton. "Apollo Crease had the last one. All the gems were left in here when he bridged into this world." "Okay," I began. "But couldn't you tell us all this before? And why all the trying to kill us?" "Like I said, the company can't have anyone knowing all about this." Anna shrugged. "This information is Crease only. You do know that Paracel is owned by our people, right?" "Right," I murmured. I should have known. "But anyway," she continued, "the story doesn't matter." And with that, she walked past me, ripped the map off the wall, rolled it up, and then kicked a box in the corner, spilling dozens of shiny gemstones. "Wait, what are you doing with the map?" I asked. "It's not time for you to understand," she said sharply. "Maybe if you kept your little mouth shut, I would spare you." I could only watch as she stepped past me. "Make your choice," she advised, walking away, taking the stone on the desk. "Close the doorway and hope that the devourer doesn't consume you first." "Wait, did you see Kaz? Are they—" "Kaz is fine." Anna rolled her eyes. "Walked right past them on my way here. I didn't shoot him. I just used my gun a little to get him out of the way." She put a hand on the handle of the door. "Now, if you'll excuse me." She screamed as the door opened, revealing a mass of tentacles and flesh. Anna backed into the room, bumping into me. She shot at the creature, and I ran behind a desk for cover. I looked up, seeing that the creature looked eerily similar to the Puritan woman, or was she a crease, from earlier. The monster entered the room, nearing Anna. It paid no attention to me, however, and I slipped out of the room, silent as could be, but not before taking a green stone from the ground. I looked back as I exited, seeing a terrified Anna do battle with the beast. I looked at the door, and then slammed it shut, moving a pew from the aisle to lock both inside. "Oi!" screamed Anna, hammering at the door. "You can't do this! Let me out this instant!" I looked back and sneered. "I think I can." I walked away, hearing Anna's screams coming from behind me, muffled by the large wooden door. The next time I looked behind, I saw nothing but blood on the small glass frame. Still, I was left with a problem. I had to kill the beast, or lock it in, taking myself with it. I eyed the stone in my hand. I wasn't ready to die, and even if I was, I had no idea how to use the stone to close the door. The crease journal wasn't very effective either, and I wasn't exactly sure if the spirits, or whatever those were, would be helpful either. No, there had to be a way to kill it. I didn't know yet. I walked around the church, confused as ever. I looked out a window, now seeing what looked like the outside world. The building was now in a junkyard. Now, though, it had been corrupted by the devourer. In the distance, I saw the remains of a great city, now reduced to ruins. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice murmured in the background. "Quint?" I turned around. He was alive. "Indeed," he confirmed. Quint pointed at the horizon. "I used to live there." "You?" "I forgot to tell you this before, but I'm immortal," Quint explained softly. "It's complicated. I was there when they first found the devourer. I was there when they opened the second doorway, and I was there, here, in Mayflower Valley, all trying to stop another catastrophe. What she did not realize is that when she shot me, her gun was loaded with a tranquilizer dart." I chuckled at that. "It seems that every time I try to warn the creases not to open doors," he laughed bitterly, "they go and do the exact opposite. It's always about being the bigger fish to them, always wanting to destroy the devourer. They should know by now it can't—" "Wait!" I exclaimed. "What did you just say?" "They should know. Before that—" "Fish?" they questioned. "That's it." "I don't get it," Quint puzzled. "What do you mean?" "There's always a bigger fish," I explained. "This is going to sound extremely dumb and Christian." "All right. What if—" I pointed out to the city. "What if we opened another doorway? Not back home, no. To another world. To something else. I'm sure something out there can kill this thing. We just need to be lucky." "How would we know it won't destroy this world?" Quint contested. "Or try to destroy our Earth too? A message across time, space and worlds," I theorized. "We ask for help. Surely something out there is far more powerful and generous to help us." "Another god. Another species," Quint commented. "You're right. We'll have to risk it. It's the only way forward. We better hurry and get back, 'cause I really need medical attention now." With that, Quint looked to the stars, and then back at the open field. I watched him, and then followed as he led me outside, walking miles and miles through an alien landscape until we arrived at a tower between the church and the city. It was magnificent, although ruined. Spirals of gold lined it, and murals that had long since begun to decay were practically glowing amongst the light. "Where are we?" I wondered. "What is this place?" "Observation Tower 7, Quint informed. "When the Creases sent out expeditions between this world and yours, they created this tower as a way to send messages between them." "I see." Quint tapped at buttons at a control panel, and slowly the place began to light up. "I'm hoping." The lights dimmed, much to his annoyance, but a kick from me later, the lights were back. "This thing still has enough juice to at least send a message." Quint tinkered with the panel while I looked around at the art. The Creases, whoever they were truly artistic people. A shame they had to abandon their world. Truly a shame. "So," Quint started, a smile on his face, "what message do you want to send?" He gestured at the keyboard with letters of a language I assumed was Creasian. "Send help. Details on the Devourer," I suggested. "Something like that." Quint typed. A moment later, he hit a green button and a small chirp picked up. "And now we're done. Let's go back." "Back?" I inquired. "Where?" "The lab," Quint shrugged. "Where else? We can't do anything, and I don't know how to close doorways either, as I never learned how to use the stone." "But the Devourer will be dealt with, eventually," Quint murmured. "Let's just get back." And so I helped Quint up, and we strolled back through the ruined city. Since he was feeling dizzy from the attack, I had to lug him the whole route back. We went into the cavern, watching the church at the centre. We walked down a spiral rock staircase, back into the old Shepherd lab. "Hey, you guys are back," Kaz greeted. Kaz noted the sad look on our faces. "What happened? Did you kill it?" "No," I explained what had happened. "We can only hope someone else does. But hey, at least the enzyme works on the things in our world." "But the doorway," Kaz reminded. "The Devourer's going to keep coming." "There's no way to close it," Quint confessed. "Neither of us know." "We can collapse the lab on the other side," I explained. "That'll at least prevent the Devourer from heading in, at least for a long while." We walked back into the doorway, climbing the rope ladder and returning to Shepherd Technology HQ. Daniel was there, as well as a lot of other scientists. They were happy to see us, although saddened to see that we weren't able to close the doorway. But at least the zombie apocalypse was over now. A strike team found a can of enzyme left over, and they used it to de-devourize the lab, sending it back to normal. Further, they had made more, and as we spoke, he told us planes were spreading it across the world. I laughed at that. Guess Maxwell will be talking about chemtrails soon. Daniel and the others laughed at that too. I looked back through the well, seeing the world between for a final time. I hoped if I ever saw it again, the Devourer would be gone, for good. And as I looked at it, I swore I could hear something odd, something different. The sound of something screaming. And then I walked out, and hearing an explosion behind me, I knew they had collapsed there. "That wasn't us!" someone spoke. "It came from the well." I looked back, rushing towards the well. Sounds of explosives came through, and I saw the lab on fire, burning with a strange purple flame. I heard a great scream come from the other world, and through the doorway, I saw the motley covering began to die, catching ablaze by an unseen weapon. "Someone helped," I realised. "Somebody heard our message." "It worked," Quint gasped. "I can't believe it worked." And the next time I looked through it, everything was gone. The lab the doorway was facing had collapsed, leading the doorway into nothing but debris. And then, suddenly, we heard a piercing loud noise. The lights flickered, confusing us all. "Hey, something's wrong with my watch," Kaz complained. I looked at it, seeing an odd string of text in a language I didn't understand. It's a message, Quint said, reading the watch. Quickly, he fetched a piece of paper, translating the text. Greetings, I read. We saw your message. We fixed your mold problem for you. Sacred are the Koku. I laughed, and suddenly, so was everyone else. We whooped, cheered, and were happy. We saved the world, with a little help. Brave people like Archer had given their lives for this cause, but we'd won. A little help from whoever was out there, but in the end, we won. For the next few days, I helped create more of the enzyme, as well as perfecting it, and by the next week, North America was back to normal. Somehow, it was all covered up as a terrorist attack, and that chemtrails was somehow a part of it. Maxwell Stevenson, on the other hand, had tons of material to discuss, all on the topic of zombies, much to the annoyance of Lila Cortez. And somehow, I landed myself a fancy new job working at Shepard Technology. No more Paracel for me. Now it was just me, Kaz, and a really nice Bluetooth speaker that saved my life. Oh, and the absolutely luxurious apartment Mr. Shepard gave us as a reward for saving the world. Saving the world. I should do that more often. I really should. It was about a month later when I called into Daniel's office, along with Kaz. I'd never seen the inside of his office, and when I entered, I was surprised to see that it looked relatively lively. There were multiple framed photos of his family and beautiful paintings everywhere. So, Alicia Valerio and Kaz Crow, Mr. Shepard began, pushing up his glasses as he did. Take a seat. We did. So, what is it? Kaz asked. A promotion? And by the way, who heard our message? I asked. I know we're still exploring the world between, but I'm working on some fossils, so I haven't got an update. A group of people calling themselves Raykalians, Daniel said with a shrug. They made contact a week ago. They seem like good people. Well, we've never seen their faces, but their messages seem friendly, albeit a little religious. Raykalians, I murmured. I've heard that name before. Maybe Kaya would know. Whatever it is, it sure sounds interesting, but for another time, he replied mysteriously. So, is it a promotion? Kaz repeated. Daniel chuckled. I also heard that Dr. Kreese survived. Is that true? Wait, but is it a promotion? I cut in. Let's hope those reports on Dr. Kreese are not accurate, he said with a smile. And about the promotion? Well, not exactly. He went over to a drawer and pulled out a file. I want you two on something, a kind of new expedition to a never-before-seen part of the world. He then pushed the file over to us. Open the file. You don't have to accept the job, but given your history, I'd love for you two to accept. I opened the file, revealing a photocopy of the map I saw in the other world. There were photos of a green gem, as well as silhouettes of jungles and strange creatures lurking beneath them. I read the title, Operation Consiga.